Hey, welcome, folks. Welcome to another edition of the Skift Travel Podcast. Again, I'm not the main host. Rafat Ali, CEO and founder of Skift. I'm not the main host. I have been interloping for the last few episodes, speaking to people that I've known for a while, that I've chemistry with, that I would consider industry friends. And I will continue that, I think, until the Global Forum, and then I'll back off and the regular hosts will be here. I guess I'm doing a summer residency. These days, everything is called a residency to make it look cool. So I have with me Chris Hartley, who's the CEO of Global Hotel Alliance, has been a longtime supporter of Skift, and has been a longtime CEO of Global Hotel Alliance. Chris, how many years has it been now?
It's been 21 years, amazingly, right
21
since the
years
beginning.
for GHA, but how long have you been CEO now?
Since the beginning, actually, I
Since the
was
beginning.
employee number one. Yes.
Wow. And so it's a fascinating company because it was, I was reading the history. Well, firstly, welcome to the podcast, Chris. And you're based in Dubai, which I want to ask is if in this part of the world, in the US, you obviously come from the western part of the world. Being based in Dubai was a very interesting and probably in hindsight a very good decision, because it's where the present, the future of the world is. And also, it was modeled in along with some of the airline alliances that have been there, and 4 different independent brands came together for joint ownership initially, and then now it's expanded to how many brands now, Chris?
We've got I have to say about, because it's happening so quickly. This month we've added 2 more, about 45, but we're going to be 50 very soon. So it's a big period of expansion. And yeah, from 4 to 45, it's been a long but steady growth over those 21 years.
So, give a quick primer for those of our listeners who don't know what GHA is, and GHA Discovery and Discovery Dollars, which is the consumer manifestation of it.
Great. Well, first of all, it's great to be with you and have the chance to talk to you personally in this podcast. We've, as you said, we've been working together for a while, and Skift has been a great platform for us to talk about the alliance. And so this is a perfect opportunity to go into a bit more detail. But the alliance itself, yes, 21 years old, and we're very much a collaborative organization. So we're a joint venture, actually, and we were created by hoteliers for hoteliers, if that's one way of describing it. It was a way for small hotel brands, at least that was how it was conceived, for smaller hotel brands to try and compete with the major brand players. We saw it happening 25 years ago. It was already on the horizon. I had actually started my career back in Kempinski. We were owned by Lufthansa. It was, as you know, a trend at the time for airlines to own hotel companies, and some of the best airlines owned some of the best hotel companies in those days.
IFG and others, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And Meridian and Air France and Lufthansa owned Kempinski, and it was really a perfect job that I joined in the mid 1990s, owned by Lufthansa, and we had this massive distribution platform from the airline ownership, and so being a young marketing manager, it was just very easy to get your products out there to customers. I used to say we were the back of every paper Lufthansa ticket. I mean, that was how easy it was to get the marketing message across. And as you know, you can go and check in an airline without a paper ticket in those days. So we were a brand that got very well known, especially in the German audience. And so Kempinski at the time had expanded into markets internationally very fast, following Lufthansa's roots, really. And then suddenly, come around 2000, and Lufthansa sold the last of its stake in Kempinski, and we didn't really know how we were going to cope. We had 25, 30 hotels at the time, and the question was, well, what do we do? How are we going to compete? Starwood was just starting to take shape. SPG had just been created, and the sort of advent of multi-brand loyalty programs, not just single loyalty programs. Of course, Marriott Rewards dates back to the 1980s. But I just saw problems on the horizon for small brands, and we felt that clubbing together was the way to go. We saw Lufthansa had gone off and created Star Alliance in the mid 1990s. One World and SkyTeam were created around the same time, and we basically asked one of my ex friends and colleagues from who was then at Star Alliance CEO and said, "Hey, what do you think about creating a hotel alliance?" And he became a friend and advisor for several years. And from those sorts of conversations, looking at what the airlines are doing, was born a Global Hotel Alliance with four privately owned independent brands. And the story has then continued for the last 20 years. So that was really the thinking behind the creation of the alliance, is how are independent brands going to survive at this world where clearly we could see that the big guys were just going to get bigger. Loyalty was going to be a big part in that. And of course, it was the advent of the OTAs. We'll come on to that, I'm sure, loads later. But they were just starting to gain power and traction. And it was inevitable that sooner or later they were going to become an existential threat, especially to the smaller brands as well.
21 years in with it's been, I think, 10, 11 years for discovery part of the program to launch, and Discovery Dollars, I think, were launched along with it. Um, how should we think about discovery versus GHA, and why is there a distinction that we should care for from an industry perspective, at least?
There is a distinction. I think the clearest way to describe the distinction between what the alliance was founded to do and what the alliance loyalty program does is the alliance was really founded as a B2B organization, so to help each other with distribution, with technology. We'll talk more about technology, I'm sure, but we have Oracle as a tech partner and a shareholder in the business, and they've been with us from day one. So tech was a very important part. Sharing technology platforms, sharing data, using technology to enable us to recognize customers, sales, distribution. All of these were the sort of core component parts of what the alliance was about originally. But we always had loyalty in our sights, but we knew it wasn't the low hanging fruit. That was something that was going to be really complicated. We were going to need to persuade all these different brands to effectively fold in their loyalty programs and create one master program. We didn't have the advantage of Starwood, who, of course, were just Barry Sterling was just going out buying brands and then forcing them onto this SPG platform, which was a brilliant strategy, but it was easier, if you like, to affect if you own all of these brands. They didn't have any choice. We had to do it through persuasion, through lobbying, through creating this shared vision, really. So the loyalty thing took a while to incubate. The alliance was founded in 2004, and we didn't launch the loyalty program, GHA Discovery, until 2010. So 6 years later. And then 10 years after that, or just after the pandemic, we relaunched GHA Discovery with, as you mentioned, Discovery Dollars, which is really the second generation GHA Discovery program, where we really went all in to sort of compete with the big brand programs with a much harder currency, a common currency that all the brands now share. And that's really turbocharged this next phase of growth that we see happening at the moment.
And so discovery is the consumer face of it. Do you care so all the constituent brands? It's the minor group and all their constituent brands. They bought NH Hotels, which was part of your program anyway. Um, and
No, actually,
then
NH, interesting. NH joined the program after Minor had acquired them. So
after minor acquired, okay,
yeah, they had their
and
own program, NH Rewards, originally, and that merged into GHO Discovery.
Capella Group that many of you
Yeah.
know from Singapore and Asia. Um, Viceroy, which is now owned by Highgate here in New York, and a bunch of others. And so, do you care? Should consumers care about GHA, or should they care about the hotels themselves and the hotel brands?
I think it's the reverse. I'm not sure every brand member of the program would like to think that ultimately a consumer is entering today a loyalty ecosystem, which I believe is the future of loyalty. Again, I'm maybe looking a bit further ahead of this point, but I think the days that a hotel, I mean, I grew up in a world in the 1990s where individual hotels would have individual hotel loyalty programs and looking after their own repeat guests. And then brands created individual brand loyalty programs. And then that wasn't enough because a brand with 20 hotels isn't satiating the needs of a customer traveling around the world. So brands then had multi-brand loyalty programs, SPG, as we've just been talking about. And so I believe today that consumers are entering a marketing ecosystem that they feel has brands and products that they relate to, that they like, that look after them the way they want to be looked after. And to a certain extent, it is a practical relationship. It's where do I travel to, and does this brand have hotels that I like in places that I go to? Does my company allow them to stay in those hotels if you're a business traveler? A part of it's down to whether or not your corporate programs enables you to participate in those programs by enabling you to stay in those hotels. So I think the reason customers join a loyalty program today and the hotels they choose is largely based on that loyalty ecosystem. However, as you look to individual hotels and brands, clearly there is a customer that chooses an individual property, especially leisure customers. Clearly, there are customers that choose individual brands, especially at the luxury end of the market, that don't have loyalty programs. But I think if you're talking the sort of mass consumer. And at the end of the day, we're looking at a rapidly growing middle class who want to travel. And if you want to capture a fair share or decent share of that group of people, especially in the early stage of their travel experiences, then a loyalty program is a great way to do that. And there, and you would expect, and I think the big brands more and more are trying to achieve that, is that new consumer enters the world of travel through that loyalty program, and then bit by bit, their brands within their loyalty ecosystem become stickier and stickier. Yeah, and then they discover the individual hotels. So yeah, so perhaps you're loyal to GHA Discovery, and and you go, wow, I didn't realize that. As you just said, Capella is part of this program. Fantastic. Then you discover Capella, and you may well, especially if you stayed in a few Capella hotels, you may then say, wow, that's an amazing experience. I must try more of these hotels. So I think it works both ways, but I think ultimately, I would expect with time that the mass volume of customers is coming through the door of the loyalty system first. But at the very luxury end of the market, of course, there is still that individual hotel appeal.
So let me get a few more sort of factual answers out of the way. So, how much of your business is leisure versus corporate?
It's more leisure. I'd say we're about 60%. It's always difficult to put your finger on it these days because there's so much blended travel. Um, I would say you need to look at it on a brand by brand basis. So if you take a brand like NH, you mentioned, they tend to be more corporate oriented. They're corporate hotels operating in the upscale, let's say, segment in cities around primarily Europe. So that would typically cater for a business traveler. But then you've got brands you mentioned like Capella, but you've got Anantara, you've got
Anantara, I'm sure, is
Viceroy.
always more leisure, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're there. You're talking, although they've moved into cities like Amsterdam and Lisbon and others, for example, where they've got more corporate travelers today, they're predominantly leisure-oriented businesses. And then we've got brands that have joined recently, like Cinnamon Hotels in Sri Lanka, which is a pure leisure play. Rotana, which is joining at the end of the year, is more business-oriented. So it rather depends on the mix of brands that we got. But we got a very healthy leisure mix of brands, a high number of resorts in great resort destinations around the world. And that means we're capturing a lot of leisure travelers. And that's been good, especially in the last few years, because leisure travelers are typically paying more, staying longer, and perhaps surprisingly have become more part of the loyalty mix than historically. Historically, you captured the business traveler, who was the most frequent traveler. But today's traveling leisure, the growing sort of middle class leisure traveler is doing more and more trips a year. We typically have customers telling us they're going on 4 to 5 leisure trips a year. In the old days, if someone said they did 4 to 5 business trips a year, that sounded a lot. Now people are talking about going on a leisure trip every other month. And so there's much more of a need today to capture that leisure traveler because they're ultimately more lucrative than the somewhat commoditized business traveler.
So, but on the business side, you tie up with these like, do you have a sales force that works with corporates to sign up like Hilton and Marriott do, or is there any difference there?
We don't do as much in sort of direct sales as the big brands would do. We don't have, we're not replacing the brand's own sales teams, but we do. But what we are doing is we're leveraging those relationships that the bigger trade buyers are looking for. So, for example, um, I'm heading off next week to GBTA in Denver, where um, all of the big TMCs gather, and we sit with them and say, "Look, why don't you do a deal with the entire GHA portfolio of brands?" saves you time. We can bring you 45 brands in one go effectively, and we can then negotiate global preferred deals that any of our smaller individual brands will simply be unable to do. But other than build those relationships and sign those agreements, the actual sort of day-to-day relationship management, corporate RFP signing, etc., is still done by the brands themselves. But what we're able to do is leverage that relationship and scale that we bring to help our smaller brands to be part of global preferred programs, and that gives them preferencing and listing and access to RFPs that they couldn't get on their own.
Hey everybody, I'm Sarah Kopit, editor-in-chief at Skift, and I've got to be honest with you, I am just blown away by how fast our industry is changing. AI is transforming how people book, platforms are flipping business models and consumer behavior. It is more unpredictable than ever. And that's why I am so excited for this year's Skift Global Forum happening September 16th through 18th in New York City. This year's theme jumps into the future, Travel 2030, people, platforms, and new paths forward. You'll hear from leaders at Booking Holdings, IHG, AirAsia, plus dozens more shaping the future of travel. And this year, we've got more than just stage talks. We've got expert-guided roundtables and new networking formats designed to spark real conversation so you can do real business. Expect it to be more interactive, more personal, and more valuable than ever. Join me and the rest of the industry at Skift Global Forum. Use the code PODCASTS for $800 off the full price at live.skift.com. Hope to see you there.
Let's jump into some of the bigger picture questions on sort of loyalty, and since you're very passionate about the state of independent loyalty, from your perspective, this is a big picture question. Sort of take it in any direction you want to. What is the state of a loyal consumer? What does a loyal consumer want today, and why does the consumer? In an age where infinite choice, why would a consumer want loyalty when they're sort of been habituated in a digital world, not just in travel but everywhere, Amazon, etc., of just going by price or just choice, by the sheer choice?
Well, I think loyalty can be looked at in different ways. And I think on the one side, some people would argue there aren't loyal customers today. Every customer is a dilettante. They will go, if they're looking for price, they'll look for price. If they're looking for experiences, they'll go to social media, ask their friends. They're willing to experience new destinations. They're willing to go in to places that 10 years ago they wouldn't have dreamt of traveling to. It's easier to get to places than ever before because of airlift, taking people to so many new destinations. And so, is there really a loyal traveler? Is there a space for a loyalty program with that kind of new consumer? I think you have to go back again to what you're trying to achieve when you create the loyalty program today, at least in the first place. And that is, you're creating a mechanism to capture customer information and build a direct relationship with that consumer. And a loyalty program is a reason to justify creating that relationship. Once you've captured that customer information, they've given you permission, because so much today is around permission marketing. You need to ask the customer, say, yes, I'm okay for you to talk to me. You have to give them the reason to do that. Once you've captured their information and you started to build a conversation with them, you can start figuring out what they like, what they respond to, what content to send them. And bit by bit, you build this trust and confidence with the customer that you're the sort of company that they want to deal with, that you understand them, you like them, you're easy to do business with. They can find what they're looking for. And that's where scale comes in. It's like, is this loyalty program that I've started a relationship with going to give me choice? So you start delving around the loyalty program and you say, oh, wow. And this is why I think JJ is quite unique. It's like most people haven't heard of a lot of our brands. I mean, some of the brands we've signed this year. I've just joined in the last few months. A brand like Sunway in Malaysia, for example. Right? Has anyone heard of that brand? Tons of people you meet have been to Malaysia, but they probably never heard of Sunway. Even Ratana, which is 80 hotels in the Middle East. If you hadn't been to the Middle East, you might not know Ratana. We just
What's the
launched.
guarantee you give? What's the guarantee? So, like, let's say I'm traveling to Malaysia, never heard of Sunway as just a consumer, but
Yeah.
I'm a loyal member of GH Discovery. Do I trust your taste as a consumer to say Sunway is going to be great?
I think the interest, yeah, I think the answer is I don't know whether you're going to trust my the hotel some way that I'm offering you, but I've achieved one tick, and that is I've created a relationship with you. I've created a second tick, and that is the relationship is good enough that you've been curious to look into our website and try and find out about what hotels we might have in Malaysia. Now, this is where the alliance is different. We at that point rely on the hotel to provide us with good content and us with the sort of customer experience and execution of all of the recognition and benefits that we're offering. That responsibility now goes back to the brand. We don't operate any hotels. We are simply the aggregator of all these brands. So we now rely on some way to deliver on that experience. What we will do is tell a Sunway story the way they want us to tell that story. And we would be confident that the Sunway brand reflects how it is positioned. And of course, as you say, customers are smart enough to look at social media and reviews and everything. So they're going to quickly establish that it's a upper upscale brand in a good location in Kuala Lumpur, in a part of the city they may or may not want to stay at, and they will do their own research before making that decision. But what we've achieved as an alliance is we've created that relationship with the customer that Sunway could never have talked to on their own, other than through an OTA at high cost. We've got their content in front of that customer, and we've given Sunway the best chance to capture a direct relationship with that customer. And we've made a promise to that customer that when they show up at the hotel, they'll get whatever level of recognition we're promising within the program. And Sunway will hopefully deliver on that, which I'm sure they will. So if they do deliver on that and the experience matches the expectation, it may be an ultra luxury experience like with a Capella hotel. Obviously, price tends to be a giveaway on that one. It may be, a very pleasant upscale family hotel, and that's what you're looking for. But at the end, that they've delivered on a promise, which the loyalty program gives the customer. And I think at that point, the alliance has achieved what we want because the economics now are very different. And one thing I should point out here is that 70% of our hotels are owner operated. Now, that represents those 70% of, call it 900 hotels. So 600 odd hotels are owner operated hotels. They could be families, sovereign wealth. In some cases, we've got hotels that have been owned for generations. And the Ferragamo family, their hotels in Italy, the Lungano collection, they're privately owned assets. Now, none of the major brands have that level of ownership. In fact, with probably more owned assets in the alliance than there are in any of the other major brands. And what that means is that this loyalty relationship that we started simply by capturing the customer's information, giving them a reason to join our loyalty program, if they continue with that relationship, that's Sunway has acquired that customer in Kuala Lumpur for about 10%, possibly up to 15% less than it would have cost them to acquire that customer through an OTA. And if you own that asset, which they do, you've just added 15% to their bottom line on that customer spend because it flows straight through. There is no other cost. So you've created an economic value add for the owner of Someway that he can't possibly get through an OTA. The OTAs will tell you, yes, we're brilliant. We're going to bring you customers you couldn't get on your own. Yeah, true. Absolutely. They're going to reach parts of the world that you can't reach on your own. Yeah, absolutely. But at what cost? And so the ultimate value of the alliance is that if we can achieve penetration with the loyalty program, we're eventually going to make these hotels more profitable, which for an owner is obviously straight
Is
into
a
their
big deal
pocket.
because it
And
all
yeah,
falls to
it's a
the
big
bottom
deal.
line.
Yeah,
Or yeah,
exactly.
in terms of there's some worry, much of it legitimately, of like independent brands are disappearing. A bunch of them have been bought by the large
Yeah.
companies. Example, Citizen M just got bought by, it was an owner-operated thing, just like you said. Ratan Chadda, you probably tried to convince him to join. Well, actually, it's not the demo that you look for. But anyway, so they just got bought by Marriott. The brand itself, the hotels are still owned by Citizen M, original owner. And many of the independent brands have been bought by these large companies that are looking to sort of write off the mojo of independence, because consumers have spoken and they want independent brands, or at least in their leisure, on their own choice. A lot of them want consumer brands. What's your sense of the health of the independent hotels? And independent hotels are not a single term. They're chains, like medium-sized to small-sized chains, independent. So what's your sense of what it is worldwide? Because you have a worldwide view versus US, for instance.
Yeah, I think it's very different outside the US, where most of the independents have been absorbed into one of the big brands. And you talk about sort of recent acquisitions, but I read a fun article about Graduate Hotel's recent acquisition by Hilton, and apparently the owner, who had vehemently, may have been even with Skip, but the owner vehemently had sworn that he would never sell out to one of the big brands. And this is my baby. I'm going to stay independent. I think it's almost symptomatic of the problem that I was just describing about independent hotels. Is they actually want to remain independent, and would prefer to remain independent. Ergo, the comments from the Graduate owner, but in the end, the economics run away from them. So it's like, if I'm going to pay 18 to 20% to an OTA to fill my hotels, and I don't have the distribution, doesn't matter what a cool product that I've created. At the end of the day, especially you need international demand, or you need demand across multiple segments, for example. You simply get to the point where you say the economics don't make sense anymore. I can add 5% of my bottom line if I hand my brand over to one of the big brand loyalty programs, and they'll fill it. They have higher penetration at a slightly lower cost of sale. And so in the end, the economics win the argument, and they sell out. And I guess that's the ultimate risk to the independent sector. To a certain extent, what we're trying to do is say, before you do that, why don't you come and join Global Hotel Alliance and have a stab at fending off this sort of ridiculous cost base that you're facing by relying too heavily on the OTAs. We've had brands that have joined us that say to me, "Oh, we're getting about 80% of our business from OTAs." I'm just like, 80% of your business from OTAs. So basically, you're automatically got a cost of sale of like 20% on 80% of your business. And then they say, well, we get 3% through our own website, which is perhaps not surprising if you've only got 5 hotels on your website. Like, why would a consumer end up there? And if you performance market the hell out of your own website, it's going to cost you that anyway, because you're bidding against all the big players anyway. So they're like desperate, and they don't want to sell out to one of the big brands. So they say, can we join the alliance? And how much can you reduce our dependence on OTAs? Well, we're not exactly miracle cure or anything, but what we can do over time is bit by bit lure customers into our loyalty program and try and get them to start booking direct. And we've had examples. We through Pan Pacific took a couple of hotels in Japan, joined the loyalty system. So Pan Pacific and Park Royal in Tokyo in Shinjuku, and they opened about a year and a half ago. And the owners, so they're owner operated by Tokyo Corporation, was saying they're just astounded by how much direct business they were able to generate into those hotels. Partly because Pan Pacific is such a well-established operator within the alliance, one of our shareholder and founder members as well. But the amount of direct business they're able to drive relative to their independently run assets, and they're quite a big brand. But as you know, at the moment, everyone wants to go to Japan. Well, if you want to capture international incoming business to Japan, most people are going to say, "Well, I don't know any hotels in Japan. I'll look up on an OTA." And so they find a hotel on an OTA and check the reviews and book it. And so for all of these independent owners, it becomes a question of, okay, the economics no longer make sense for me to have
Yeah.
90%
And when you say
OTA
you've
business.
worked to use economics, Chris, I'll ask you one this one. You use the word economics obviously many times. is economics purely distribution, at least today?
I don't think it's only distribution
Well, I
because
guess in
you've got,
your end of the world is purely distribution, but obviously operations and everything else matters. RevPAR
yeah,
matters, but it all sort of where the rubber hits the road is distribution, right?
it's distribution, the costs of acquisition of. So you've got the cost of acquisition of a new customer. How do you go and find a new customer? How do you retain an existing customer as get them coming back? And that is very much driven by distribution. The other factors that then come into play is the cost of operation, where you're positioning your product, what ADR you can drive relative to your competitors. So, a typical argument to the big brands is we'll drive a higher ADR because the I don't know, the Marriott brand or the Hilton brand adds brand premium. And so it's not just about the cost of distribution, it's about the brand premium. And it's difficult for us as an alliance to say we add brand premium. What I can say is if you can capture a leisure customer from the US and get them to come and stay in the Ferragamo Hotel in Italy, that they will pay a significant premium. And if they book direct, is going to be that's going to be a benefit. So it's subtle, but I think we aren't dealing as the big franchises are in the argument that we're going to add brand premium ourselves. So we are a distribution play and a cost of acquisition play. But the brands themselves obviously have the ability over time and through retention to build their own brand premium. But that's very hard to do. Again, as I said right at the beginning, it's quite hard to achieve brand premium if you've got so few hotels.
Yeah, it's very hard. Let me ask you actually a couple more questions. You are the fastest growing hotel loyalty program. Sean, my colleague, did a story recently that you're the fastest growing hotel loyalty program, correct? Did I have that correct?
That's right. Oh, it's actually the great stat that he came up with, which I now quote at every opportunity, is that we have the most members per room of any loyalty program. We also have, which is another stat that I need to get more visual at some point with you guys at Skift, is that we actually have a similar amount of upscale and luxury hotels in the alliance as any of the major brand programs. So we got about 650 upscale and luxury hotels. So if you actually divide up Bonvoy and Hilton Honors and Live Limitless and actually look at the number of upscale and luxury properties, we're quite similar in scale. So if you think we've got that scale of upscale and luxury hotels, which are very popular with international leisure travelers, and we've got much higher penetration per room in terms of membership, we're in quite a good place. But clearly what we don't have is the hundreds of millions of marketing dollars that the brands are able to throw at consumer marketing, and that obviously leaves us at a disadvantage. So we have to hustle a
What
little bit.
consumer marketing do you do today?
It's all through our brands. We're not doing ourselves and consumer marketing. We're obviously promoting our own website and app with performance marketing dollars, but we're not. It would be foolish for us to try and compete. There's no appetite among our brands to put hundreds of millions into sort of shared advertising pot. So it's up to the individual brands to push the program. They co-opt the branding. So Kempinski will promote the program as Kempinski Discovery. Minor, you've been reporting on just this week about all the new brands that they're adding, Colbert Collection, the Wolseley, and Minor Reserve Collection, etc. So they all now come under Minor Discovery. Discovery is sort of, if you like, our master loyalty franchise. So to a large extent, we do rely on the marketing heavy lifting coming from the brands themselves, because coming back to economics, we weren't designed by our hotel owners to spend hundreds of millions on
Ton of
advertising.
dollars,
We're
yeah.
designed to operate an efficient loyalty program.
Would you want to convince your board to get this pot?
We have the discussion a lot. We just actually had our CEO annual CEO meeting in Brussels, and one of your colleagues actually attended our press event. But the new Corinthia, actually, which if you're in Brussels at all in the foreseeable future, go and try it out. It's an amazing hotel. It's a big topic. We actually had our CEOs in work groups talking among themselves about how we could leverage the alliance more. And one of the topics was, would a co-opted marketing pot make sense? And we joked about what the other brands are doing, and Paris Saint-Germain have just won the, well, they didn't win, did they? They won the European Champions League, but they didn't win the Club World Cup. But they have Accor Live Limitless, and for the last 7 or 8 years, Marriott Bonvoy have been sponsoring Manchester United. And I sort of semi-joked and said, look, if we all put, a couple of $100,000 in the pot across 40 brands, maybe we could do this. What do you think? Um, I don't think the
Oh,
appetite's for.
to sponsor a team just for exposure. Yeah. Well, when you guys are ready, just let us know. We'll break the story. So whenever that happens, how much percent is so? What's the geographic split of the Discovery members? Is it heavy non-US, ex-US?
Yeah, it's interesting actually. The So we've gained a huge presence in Europe when NH joined the program in 2022. So NH brought in 10 million Europe, mostly European members, heavy Spain, Germany, Benelux, UK. So about half of the 31 million members are European residents. The US is about 2.7 million today, but we have the biggest outbound international travelers coming from the US. So by far our number one market. So last year it hit about $300 million. It's holding up so far. We do especially well over the summer months. Seems to be holding up okay. We've been a bit nervous with what's going on, but that's our number one outbound market. So um, if and then the rest of the spread, just to answer the rest of that question, the rest of the spread is Asia dominant. Southeast Asia were very strong with brands like Pan Pacific, Capella. We talked about Marco Polo's brands, for example, and Australia. We've got a strong presence in Australia, New Zealand as well. So we're nicely spread. India's a growing market. We do Skip India Forum together, of course, and
Yeah, with the Leela.
we've got the
Wasn't
relationship with the
Leela at
Leela
Leela
Group.
at some point? Leela Kempinski? Am I misremembering it? Do you
You're
remember
not
that?
at all. It was my one of my first trips when I joined Kempinski was to the then Leela Kempinski in Mumbai. That was a long-standing
Yeah.
relationship built around Lufthansa as well because of the airport proximity of the Leela Mumbai to the airport. Yeah. That's right. So that was a long-standing relationship and continues 25, 30, nearly 30 years later now. So we'd like to build a presence in India. We're heading towards 1 million members in India. And of course, we see that as one of the big outbound markets. But the database is pretty nicely spread. US still really the strong,
Dollar volume. Yeah.
but yeah, and the international businesses and premium leisure with high rates. You can't look far from the American market, and it poses a problem for us because, as we were saying earlier, the US market is saturated with the big brands, and so there aren't many independents left.
Yeah.
They have all given up the ghosts, the graduates of the world, and so who do we go after in that US market? Of course, we could do a partnership, but at the end of the day, we're sort of competing with the big brands. So a partnership is difficult. And they, as I said earlier, they just want to acquire brands and put them into their loyalty system. So a partnership is complicated. We've done partnerships with now with Regent Seven Seas Cruises, for example, which is heavy US centric. So
Yeah.
that gives us access to a US audience who are very sort of high net worth
High end.
international
Yeah.
travelers. But yeah, I think the
What about
global spread
airlines?
of the database is pretty good.
Have you thought about airlines, or is there, like, because airlines generally have large loyalty programs? Is that a consideration?
Yes. Again, the Align mature, programs are very mature. They sort of grew up ahead of the hospitality industry, so they sort of imposed their airline points currencies on us. And so, if you wanted to get a foothold into an airline program, you basically had to offer currency exchange where you allowed your members to flip their points into airline points. And that's a risk for us because we've got a new currency, right? So Discovery Dollars. So if
Yeah,
I've got
actually, talk about that. This was the headline I buried because I think that one of the, from my as a consumer perspective, the biggest attraction for me, among other reasons, would be one of the biggest attractions would be just the simplicity of one Discovery dollar equals $1. What's your promise on, like, that will not be diluted?
Well, I think that's one thing that stands us apart. Customers in all our research when we were launching our currency. and we were talking about points and free night systems, and do we just copy paste what the big brands are doing and the airlines have done over the years? Was consumers are getting more and more fed up, and of course, ironically, we're doing during the pandemic, where all these programs are getting devalued, and
Yeah.
the thresholds for
It's
upgrades
the
and
worst.
everything.
It's the worst part of any loyalty program. It's like
Yeah.
the devaluation. You have no sense of what you're getting.
So everyone got fed up, and there was an argument that we should not have any form of currency, but in the end, we gave in to the competitive and inevitable that we needed to have a currency to truly compete on scale. So we decided, and again, you can only really do this if you're owned by people who are single-minded about creating a program that creates value for them rather than value for the alliance itself. And that is a currency that would not be devalued. So we just said one Discovery dollar is going to equal one US dollar, and that's it. Now, do we have the legal right to change the value of a Discovery dollar? We do, but it would be complicated, difficult to explain, and defeat the whole purpose of the currency, which is we want people to know that if you've got 100 Discovery dollars in your wallet, you can use them in cash at any of our hotels at any time. And as we evolve the program, you can use those Discovery dollars in adjacent businesses as well. This week, we just went live with the Wolseley restaurant group in London, which you probably know that Miner acquired a few years ago, and the great restaurants in London. So now you can go into London with your Discovery dollars, and they switch into pounds automatically, spot rate on your app, and you can use those Discovery dollars in the restaurants. And we're going to roll it out to other partners as well. I think coming back to your question, Discovery dollars are simple because a consumer knows what they get, and what we're discovering is that if you put 100 Discovery dollars into someone's wallet, they understand immediately the value, and they're like 10 to 15 times more likely to go off and do something that you want them to do, namely come back to one of your hotels and book through your channels if they've got these dollars in their wallet because they actually understand the value of them. So the biggest disservice we could do to the program, obviously economics, assuming we can survive economically and the actuaries are right in their forecasting that we can afford it, the worst thing we could do would be to devalue them. That's what we don't. We want this program to be perceived as more transparent, more valuable. So I think it's a gamble, but as long as it's not all about us and it's all about our brands, which the alliance is, then I think we can afford it, and I think it's a very strong message to the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is if you were to do a consumer campaign, just as an industry observer, would be three sort of points to highlight, which is independent, operator, owner operated majority, and three would be the simplicity. I'd probably put the simplicity top, and then independent sec, because it seems like consumers are motivated by their own interest, and in this case, the financial interest of like simplicity of the program seems to be the
Yeah.
to be the easiest. If you were to anyway, call me to your next board meeting. I'm happy to
Well,
convince them to put a
you
dollars together.
also have uncanny insight into how consumers respond to us when we do our survey. We just did our annual survey on the program, and simplicity came out as number one. That is what they want. They want a program that's simple, and the second point was transparency. And they're fed up of being screwed over, as they would say in the vernacular, by these loyalty programs. It's like I thought I had enough points to do X, and now I can't do anything. And in the UK, where I come from originally, and I've had the British Airways executive for life, basically. And there's now this massive debate raging as how all these customers have been screwed over because they had their gold card for years, and now they've turned it into a completely different system with Avios and how much you have to spend. And so customers, the trouble with loyalty programs, if you get it wrong, you then upset your customers and have entirely the opposite effect. And so whereas loyalty programs can be brilliant in terms of engaging people, and I love the notion that consumers are irrationally loyal. If you get your loyalty program right, people will do crazy things to stay in your top tiers and to keep their. I mean, how many? I think the Americans invented the points run, where you sort of, you fly from Phoenix to Seattle or something just to get enough points to retain
Well,
your
now that stuff is gone
status.
because it's all spend based now.
It's all spend
So
based.
yeah, Yeah. Have you seen? I want to start wrapping up a little bit, but because we have such a wide-ranging conversation, it's fascinating because I'm learning so much. Have you seen propensity of? One of the things that I think through is like, if I'm selling hotels through my program, what's the propensity of people to buy other things from me? And you're selling experiences, the restaurant you just mentioned, restaurant group. What is the appetite for consumers to jump from one form of this hotel form to another form, and where do you see loyalty programs sort of morphing in the coming years on that?
Well, I have a view, which is a personal view, but I'll share it for the purposes of this conversation, which is not necessarily based on any evidence, scientific evidence, but I or research evidence. But if you look at the way loyalty programs are evolving, I would say, first of all, perhaps a general point. I think loyalty is going to be at the forefront and the center of the industry in the next 5 to 10 years. So the big brands will be all about their loyalty programs. That will be that they will define their brands. They're franchises now. They don't. 5 to 10 years from now, they probably won't operate any hotels. So they're franchise players. And if you're a franchise, you have your brand name and you have your loyalty program. But we've by creating a multi-brand loyalty program, I think Accor now has 53 brands in its loyalty program. By definition, no consumer understands who those 53 brands are, and probably neither you or I could describe what half of them do or represent. So the loyalty program becomes the core brand. And so I think that is going to happen in hospitality and in travel generally. So my first prediction is loyalty becomes the absolute core product and success KPI definition of success. You already see the quarterly reports of these hospitality companies that just talk about
Well, it's already
loyalty.
happened in airlines. It's already happened in
Yeah.
airlines.
And the airlines, we know their loyalty programs are more valuable than the airline themselves. So that's phase one. It's already happening. Phase two, I believe, is you will see a merger of travel loyalty programs into a travel loyalty ecosystem. It's already happening with Avios, for example, across multiple airlines, and those of us in the industry know that they have appetite to grow the Avios currency beyond airlines. So that's going to happen. It's just inevitable. It's a question of who joins which program, but a sort of broader travel alliances around loyalty are going to be created where a common currency will exist. So you'll be able to use your Avios or maybe one day Discovery Dollars on an airline or in a hotel, in a restaurant. We're already doing that. On a cruise line, we're already enabling earning. Soon it will be burning, and eventually I predict a common currency. And then the next evolution is where does travel sit compared to all these other companies and the Amazons, the Ubers, who've already got their super apps and who already enable you to earn Uber points on basically everything you do. And so at this point, if you sit in Dubai and you open your Uber app, you can kind of do everything. You can order your groceries, you can book insurance, you can get a cleaner to come to your house, you can do all this only in Dubai kind of stuff. But that's coming, I think, to loyalty around the world. And so my prediction is in the next 5 to 10 years, loyalty's become this sort of amalgamation of cross brand, cross multi brand, multi sector products, first in travel, and then ultimately across many sectors, as you know is already happening with the Bonvoys, etc., in a way that you can use your points for anything, but at the point distribution itself also becomes consolidated. I think that's where it's heading, and so I don't know if we can be in that game, but I think there are enough periphery players across sectors that would like to jump in with an alliance like ours, and that's why I see for us the opportunity to continue to expand our own ecosystem.
Would you launch a credit card? Because all
We
of these have tied up with banks and everybody else. I mean, I guess maybe the individual brands, some of the larger ones, have their own credit card deals
Yeah, it's difficult. So the
because
US
you're a
is
global
where,
company.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the US is where it happens. If you look at the credit card, co-branded credit cards, they're in markets where the economics make sense, first of all, because there's enough money to be made for the banks and for the co-branded partners. And the US works very well for that. Secondly, you need a market where you've got a lot of product. So you need to make the credit card attractive to the customer. Why would you have a Marriott co-branded card? Well, I got thousands of Marriott hotels to earn double Marriott points or triple Marriott points, or whatever it is, all across the US. So, and the airlines likewise. As soon as you leave the US, you have to look at which markets make sense economically. Europe typically has historically not been very good for co-branded credit cards because the commission rates just don't make sense because they tend to be controlled. In the Middle East is an opportunity. We're going to have with Rotana joining, let's say, close to 100 hotels in the UAE. So we'll be one of the biggest players in the UAE. UAE is very open to the co-branded credit card. So we've signed a deal with MasterCard. We're trying, once Rotana is integrated, we'll try and launch that in 2026. So that would be our first co-branded credit card. Beyond that, I can't see that many opportunities. Maybe markets like Singapore, Thailand, where we've got enough product with multiple brands over there, but not
Yeah,
yet the US.
interesting. If there's a bunch of loyalty tech players, and you're not a tech player, you're sort of a distribution slash marketing layer on top of these independent hotels that are independent hotel groups that are part of your thing. Um, what's your sense of what you would want out of the loyalty tech world? Well, I guess Oracle is one. I guess Oracle works with you on that to an extent. In an age of AI, like, is that like, what are the conversations you're having at the board meeting in Brussels that you just had? Were there any conversations around AI?
There are. In fact, one of the keynote speeches from Oracle was not about their products, but about how AI will influence consumer behavior in the next 5 years or so. And I think every big tech company, and Oracle's up there with the biggest of the big tech companies, knows that it's happening very fast now. I just think at a consumer level, we can't quite grasp what it really means for consumers. Oracle gave us a taste of what that could look like for hotel consumers, certainly in terms of from at our level, influencing the content that customers are receiving, the prices that customers are receiving, rate loading, room types, and it showed us how basically you can remove a lot of the heavy lifting involved in revenue management and pricing and content management and all of those sort of back of house things that are happening. I think ultimately the consumer level, we also talked a little bit about um, ironically the risk of the monetization of generative AI as well, namely that we gave some examples. Ask if you ask ChatGPT to recommend a hotel in Paris, what comes out today and what might come out in the future. And today it feels a bit like Google did 25 years ago. It just churns out whatever it can think of without any bias. And then, we talked a little bit about how consumers are going to be influenced by people spending money to make sure that you get the message that you want them to get. So that's inevitably the next phase from a consumer point of view. Is it's going to be brilliant because they're going to get exactly what they want, but who's influencing that choice and who's putting that content together for them and who's paying for that? And so obviously, if you've got the bottomless pockets of the OTAs, you're going to be paying heavily to make sure that AI is effectively pushing consumers back to your booking channels somehow. Um, at the same time giving the impression that they've been given freedom of choice, which ultimately everyone would argue consumers have, but it's the influence that's going on behind the scenes. So we touched on that a little bit, but as I say, I think we're all struggling to grasp exactly what it means. And
Do you
um,
think these loyalty programs would cut deals with ChatGPT like companies directly?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can't give specific examples because I don't know enough about this area, but I know that a number of companies are experimenting now with how choice can be presented by using generative AI to basically um, put together the consumer simply asks an open question about, I want this location, this type of hotel with these sorts of facilities, and that then using AI to effectively build that proposition I
Yeah,
think that's happening in me. That's going to
that's happening
happen
now. Yeah, what geo,
now,
whatever
and
called generative optimization, whatever.
yeah.
Generative GOE or GEO. Like SEO, instead of SEO, it's GEO.
So again, I just
Interesting.
think the independents are going to, as usual, will be behind on that because we don't have the funding, we don't have the depth of IT resources. That's where us having Oracle as a shareholder in the business to be able to have access to their resources. We're even going to create an advisory board that will have those sort of tech specialists on it to sort of help us understand what we need to do. Because again, for small independents, how do you tackle this sort of you know uh, massive changes in the tech landscape? You're sitting there owning 5 hotels. Well, those 5 hotels are very important to you if you're an owner because they may be worth, I don't know, $500 million or something. But the tech that you're going to deploy to fill those 5 hotels is not scalable for an owner of 5 hotels. So, and that's where the big guys play to their strengths again of size, and that again represents a risk to the smaller players, and unless we act fast and have good people advising us.
Yeah, that's where you come in. Well, thank you, Chris. This has been fascinating. We could talk for hours on this, and we will in the future, and we'll continue to dive into the future of loyalty, particularly from not just from an industry perspective, but how consumer habits are changing. I'm very curious to continue to, and as a personal preference, a big fan of the independent ethos, obviously in hospitality and every part of travel, because I think that is needed, and consumers have shown that that's what they want, uh, at least in many of the types of travel that they do. So thank you again, Chris, and I'll see you where. When am I seeing you next? I'm seeing you next at the Global Forum in New York.
The global forum where your audience will hear a little bit more from myself and Dilip Rajakaria from Miner talking a little
Yeah,
bit
the
more
CEO of
about.
Miner. It'll be fun. The Miner owner and founder, Bill, is also going to be on stage. So it'll be a big Miners slash GHA takeover in that sense. So it will be fun. Well, thank you again, Chris. I appreciate the support, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Rafa.
Thank you for listening to the Skift Travel Podcast. Wherever you're listening, please make sure to subscribe. If you like what you're hearing, rate us 5 stars or leave us a positive review. It really helps get the word out about us, our podcast, and make sure that we can still continue to bring it to you free of charge every week.
If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell as well. That way you'll know every time we have a new episode.